listening to Around Comics.
And welcome back to another episode of Around Comics, a special bonus epised of AC.
Bonus episode.
You like all the echo. Yeah, hey, what's up? It's I'm Sal, it's Christopher Niesman, and we have a special guest for this special episode, Will Pfeiffer. What's up, Will?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Mr. the movie man of Rockford himself.
I was once the movie man, no longer, alas.
But we are talking about a movie on this episode. This is kind of we just threw one out there for listeners. We did the same thing with Invincible a couple weeks ago, and we had a gap week in between TV shows for ACTV, and so we figured that we would do a movie. One that is
we thought we had a gap week. We actually didn't.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And so we're just gonna throw this one out there into the regular feed, give people a taste of what the ACTV episodes are like over at Patreon, and you can get that at patreon.com/aroundcomics. But we're talking about Repo Man from 1984. It is a movie that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts a little bit. We'll find out if everyone likes it, loves it, hates it.
No, I didn't hate it. You want to watch the trailer before we begin discussion?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's watch it. Approved for all audiences by the.
What you got in the trunk?
You don't want to look in there.
You don't want to.
This guy is the skinniest cop I've ever seen in my life.
Well, all cops were skinny in '84.
Suppose you're thinking about a plate of shrimp. Suddenly somebody will say like plate or shrimp or plate of shrimp out of the blue. No explanation. No point in looking for one either. It's all part of a cosmic unconsciousness.
You eat a lot of acid, Miller, back in the hippie days?
Sell that car and send me your money. You don't need that car.
Put it on a plate, son. You'll enjoy it more.
Couldn't enjoy it anymore, Mom. This is swell.
What's this?
Charming friends you got there, Otto.
Thanks. I made it myself.
I had a lobotomy in the end.
Lobotomy. Isn't that for loonies?
Not at all. A friend of mine had one. I do my best thinking on the bus. That's how come I don't drive, see?
You don't even know how to drive.
I don't want to know how. I don't want to learn, see? The more you drive, the less intelligent you are.
Yeah. All right. The first thing I have to say is watching that. Could you imagine, watching that in 1984?
Yeah.
Would you have any fucking idea what that movie is about?
No.
It doesn't even try to really sell the movie.
No.
They're like, oh, here's some scenes that are that I love because I've seen it so many times. But yeah, coming in cold, what are you gonna?
Nothing. You get nothing from that.
Especially if you're coming in like, I really like that Emilio Estevez. I want to see his latest teen comedy. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, so I need to look at his filmography at that point. He had not been in a whole lot, right?
No, I think he was in like he hadn't been in Breakfast Club yet. He definitely hadn't been in stuff like Mighty Ducks and that. So he was
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And he
Well,
was
I mean, he's
he was
He's
in the
obvious
that would have been his biggest
outsider.
Outsiders, yeah.
outsider was
Because he's the biggest, he's the protagonist of the movie,
Right.
has by far the biggest role, and is not the top billed.
No, Harry
actor.
Dean is.
Yeah.
Who had done a ton of stuff up to then. You know, the guy Dick Rude, who plays his bald punk buddy
yes
in the movie, he co-wrote it, and it was throughout. Like a lot of the pre-production thought he was going to star, and then they're like, the studio's like, we need a bigger name. We're getting
Not happy
Martin
about it.
Sheen's kid. He'll be in it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wonder
This-
how they got Martin Sheen's kid, Emilio Estevez, into this movie. Like, I wonder how, like this, because this is a small film,
Yeah, very small.
tiny, and by an unknown director.
Alex Cox, right?
Yeah,
First,
Weird
yeah.
script. I mean, it's not like something. When you hear it, you're like, oh, Repo
Well,
Man
was-
and Aliens, but it's not. That's really not what the movie is like.
Is
It's
he a
not
big Monkeys fan? Perhaps
Maybe, yeah. Because well, I don't know.
Nesmith. That's
I
how
just-
my
Mike Nesmith.
He's Emilio Estevez isn't. He's like not on the commentary track or anything. So I don't know. Like,
this movie.
well, no. What I was gonna say was, weirdly enough, my wife, who's a children's librarian, it must have been like 2 or 3 years ago, went to one of the big library conferences. I promise this story's leading somewhere.
Okay.
And Emilio Estevez was
Oh,
speaking because he had directed and starred in this sort of small movie about libraries. And he did a Q&A, and Amy said he was very friendly. And somebody asked him about Repo Man, and he talked very lovingly about it, like he was proud of it, and he had a lot of fun doing it. And so,
Interesting.
Well, I mean, yeah.
He should be proud of it.
How old was he? This is a year before Breakfast Club. It's probably a year and a half before St. Elmo's Fire.
yeah.
So, I mean, is he 18 in
He's
this?
20. Well, he would have been 22 in 1984, so he's probably 21 years.
21,
21. Yeah.
He's-
So pretty young, because he's playing a high school dropout, I guess they imply, because he says at one point he tells his parents he'd go back to school if they'd give him the money, and
the $1,000.
$1,000, and they spent the money, and he's lying about going back to school, so it works out for everybody.
Exactly.
They
Yeah,
gave
it's
money to the Reverend. They
The
gave,
Reverend,
yeah.
5 Bibles in El Salvador.
It's such
So-
a weird movie. It is
really
such
is.
an odd, but also such a perfect like representation of like 1980s life in America, urban decay, social sort of apathy.
hmm
I mean,
Yeah.
it
Thi-
captures, it captures the
Yeah.
punk culture better than any movie ever.
I would agree, and I think like punk bands say that. Like this
Yeah.
one, it feels like what it was really like to be a punk back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the movie equivalent of stumbling into your house after an all-day bender and throwing whatever is in the refrigerator together to make something to eat, and it just miraculously turns out to be something really good. It's by complete accident almost.
Right, because it's not like the plot drags you, it's like a compelling plot, and it's like a bunch of hangout scenes, and
Yeah.
you kind of like these characters and listen to their crazy stuff, and then it ends. It's like,
It's not a good movie. It's
I think it's a good movie, but it's not a.
it's not a it's weird because it's not in any like it's greater than the sum of its parts.
I would agree.
You know what I mean?
Completely agree. Yeah.
And I think it's because it is like I said, like it captures that moment in time better than so many movies.
Mhm.
And that feeling, I think,
Yeah.
anyone in their teens and early 20s during that time period probably also had
Right.
of not sure where the country is going, not sure where you're going, not sure if you want to, and just like the complete, apathy for
Yeah.
everything. I think it really just grabs it, but it's also this weird movie that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, with aliens
Yeah.
and radioactive flying cars, and it's like
Well,
I mean,
it feels for me it feels like the film student like senior project kind of film in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. It's like we're going to work in some really ham-fisted trying to be super poignant lines into scenes that don't really make a whole lot of sense for him to be there, but I mean, it was
and then they undercut that too, because it's when his buddy's dying and he's like, I blame society, and he's like,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And they undercut it, or like when at the end, like, is the woman he's with she's like, what about our relationship? And he's like, well,
fuck that.
that. I didn't know what the language rules were around comics, but fuck that.
There are no.
No, I think that's what makes it so good, though. Also, is that it wasn't ever trying to be serious. I think that those moments were exactly what they end up being, which is, I mean, you even get it with like Emilio Estevez's character. He's this, like you said, high school dropout. He's a punk. He doesn't give a shit about anything. His attitude is very, punk rock, where it's like, I don't care about anything. I don't give a shit about anyone or anybody. And then he meets a bunch of dudes that are really don't give a shit.
They're like real punk.
Right.
Like Emilio's kind of like pretend punk, but these guys, their lives are punk. Like
exactly. and he starts to realize like, oh, maybe I've been kind of full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he ever vocalizes that, but I think that moment with like when his buddy's dying and it's a really weird scene.
Yeah.
It's a very odd, that whole scene, the way that it plays out is so odd.
It's like really violent for the movie too. I mean, it's like really bloody, and all of a sudden,
it turns into like a Tarantino film.
Yeah, it's like a scene from Taxi Driver or something. Yeah,
yeah, very odd. But like you said, he's like, oh, society made me do this. Like, no, you were a white suburban punk, just like
me. Yeah,
and,
exactly.
It's like, it's self-aware.
Oh, completely. Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I saw this when I saw it, I think it must have been like 5, maybe, my freshman year of college. They showed it on campus. And I mean, I was growing up in Ohio. I listened to I was sort of getting into what was punk music back then, but I wasn't a punk. I mean, look at me. I wasn't, Mr. Punker, but I mean, my buddies and I, we locked onto this movie. We must have watched the videotape like 50 times in college, and we had the soundtrack, and I mean, we knew all the lines. I could do Miller's whole rant about John Wayne, like here, right now, and I won't for reasons that.
Oh no, you must.
You could do it back then. You can't quite do it now. But
nice.
Yeah,
I think it was a movie. Even in 1984, you're dealing with kind of rudimentary special effects, even in like a post Star Wars movie world, but this was way low budget. But I love and you can just find this on the wiki page. The wiki page for it is Roger Ebert talking about watching Repo Man, and I think he was coming to the end of a long week of watching a lot of formula romances and just formula Hollywood stuff. And he said Repo Man came out of left field. It had no big stars, didn't cost much. It took chances. It dared to be unconventional, is funny, and works. There's a lesson here. So even for Roger Ebert in 1984, is it a perfect film? No, but it stood out in that year.
And I wouldn't want it to be any more perfect, really, or any slicker. I mean, kind of the rough edges are why it feels like it was made by guys who who didn't have much budget, didn't have much time, didn't have many big stars, except for Harry Dean is the biggest name in the cast, I would think,
and got billed as such.
Yeah, and he's great too. I mean, by the way, did you notice that the three guys at the lot are named Bud, Miller, and Light, all named after beers?
That's hilarious.
And Emilio Estevez's character, of course, is named Otto.
Yeah. So you're a movie guy. Do you think Emilio Estevez is a good actor?
I don't know. I mean, he's likable. He's not, Olivier or Brando or anything, but I think he's great. In this, I like him because he's like a blank slate. He just kind of meanders through the movie, and he bounces off all the more colorful characters.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody
gets angry and stomps off like Emilio Estevez.
Like Emilio, and it's all for like petty little stuff, like when his girlfriend cheats on him, and he's all drinking outside, and he starts singing "TV Party" and shouting as he walks off into the distance. And
I think he was perfect for this because he's always had a weird. I've always liked Emilio Estevez, and I've always thought like I don't know if there was more there or not, but I could see why people would put him in movies because he has such an odd energy.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
He has such a weird, intense energy, and that was perfect for this because it was very punk. It was very, I don't give a shit, and just he makes really weird decisions too. I think like,
yeah,
there's always something with him in a movie where he'll do something that's just sort of odd in the way that he handled, like the scene where him and the one guy robbed the red Firebird. And there's like going through all the shit in the car, and he just like he puts on these weird sunglasses.
Exactly what I was thinking.
And it's like that's Emilio Estevez. Like that's an Emilio Estevez thing. And then later, when they're like burning all that shit in a can, which by the way, why are they in the middle of nowhere burning that shit in a can? Like anyway,
they needed Walter to deliver those lines.
It's a nice shot.
It is. They're burning all that shit in a can, and he keeps something, and the only thing he keeps is a kid's book. It's like a golden, and it's just such a weird, perfect little odd thing that he decides to do. But even like you said, like the way he stomps off for no reason, or he has such an awkwardness to him that works in some ways. Sometimes it works really well. It's like all the intensity of his father without any of the
gravitas, maybe, or like
like the slick he doesn't have the sort of grace.
I mean, like when he's with what's her name, when he first the girl, and they go back to the lab, and he like basically like drops his pants, and he's like, let's go. And if it were a worse movie, she'd be like, oh, definitely. And she's like, get out of here, I'm at work.
Slaps him. He's just
he plays the dumb jock who refuses to be a jock. That's
who he played in, and then in Breakfast Club a year later he
was
the
dumb jock.
It's I mean it is, well, going back to what there's a lot of pretty shots.
Oh yeah,
like that's one of the things that this movie, as low budget as it is, stands out, is some of the cinematography is really good. Like there's some great scenes. They use the landscape, they use the city really well, and just like parts of it that
crappy parts, and
well, there's one camera shot that in particular that stood out, where I think it was Harry Dean Stanton in the foreground in a car, and it's one of the other secondary characters in another car, and just the way that it was framed, it reminded me of watching the director cut of The Matrix, and how they went to a lot of like anime and Japanese filmmaking to they based a lot of their shots on that. So I saw some very interestingly framed shots in Repo Man that kind of also made it feel like that art student film project.
And the way they just play with like the colors, and like the way the neon lights and the gas lights are, it's like night in Los Angeles, and it's all desolate. I know it almost has this like sort of post-apocalyptic feel without actually taking place. Like the world has ended, but it looks pretty much the same as it did. And and then at the end, they really make a lot of when the car is glowing, they that really, like, everyone who goes up to it, the lighting on them, and the way Miller looks when he's in the car, and it's a good looking film that didn't cost a whole lot to make, I'm sure.
Well, isn't the budget in the book that comes in the the budget?
Yeah, you guys have the Criterion collection. I bought mine off of Amazon Prime Video.
It's got this great green, and this is the slipcase.
The Mondo poster. You used to be able to buy that poster.
And
I was gonna buy it, and I never did. But
the little foldy thing, and then the disc just says disc, like food and drink, and the.
Well, that's I want to talk about that. Like, and then the cover to the.
And it's all like it's a big, thick book with, you know, a comic in it and everything. It's like a punk scene, is what it is. It's really well designed.
That's
it's very
cool.
cool. I haven't spent enough time going through it yet. I just got this week because I'm like, oh, I kind of wanted to buy this Criterion edition anyway, so it gave me a really good excuse to do it. And I'm glad I did. Like, I don't buy very many DVDs anymore, but it's like I was like, oh, this is a perfect reason to. Hey, I was going to ask you. Well, there's a cartoon there's a comic strip in this book. Any idea who did it?
Let me see.
It's very indie. It looks almost
it looks like somebody who would have been drawn, not like
somebody we should know. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah, it does. It does. I don't know. You would think they would credit. There's a lot of thanks production.
I don't know. It doesn't say, but
yeah,
it looks like someone. What I was going to ask you guys is that was a really interesting. Like, there's a lot of things in this that made, made it surreal, or gave it a bit of a real feel to it, outside of the green glowing, Chevy Malibu, but like all the food, everything is this generic branded cornflakes and milk and dog food, and everything is
beer.
Just drink. Like literally as simple as you could possibly get.
And I think there are things that they're talking about. Alex Cox is sort of talking about in this movie about the 80s, about nuclear weapons, about Reagan and
consumerism.
Consumerism, sure.
But it got me thinking this time watching it of like, how fucking weird, because there's a lot of scenes, not a lot of scenes, but there's a couple scenes, especially Harry Dean Stanton talking about credit and like people credit, his credit is immaculate, and that's all, it's all you need is good credit kind of thing. And it's like, how weird is it? And especially at that point in time, because I think, this maybe didn't even exist for very long. The idea of a repo man, the idea of there's someone's job to go get your car because you bought something you couldn't afford on credit. Yeah. And now there's an entire industry dedicated or built around just coming to get your car. And that's a really weird fucking thing if you think about it, right? Like that's
sure.
But I mean,
the heroes of this movie, that's what they do for a living, is go get cars from people who couldn't pay their credit for them, couldn't pay their bills.
But it's just like, that is, I mean, it's so normal now, the idea of like, oh, you bought something on credit, you can't afford it, now they take it back. Like, that's a pretty, like, we don't even take that for granted. But I mean, that didn't exist until
I don't know. I mean, I know that I know Alex Cox like was friends with Repo Man in Los Angeles, and I think that's what like inspired the script.
Right. Yeah. It's probably started in the 60s.
When credit cards took off,
when credit cards started, or when financing, and
repo men probably weren't around for very long. When this movie came out, like maybe 20 years, it was, if that. I
think you're probably right.
And it's like, but now it's like, that doesn't even seem like a weird thing. But
it seems like a natural thing. Like, oh, I'm gonna blow my credit, and then they're gonna come get it, and then. That's the way life is. I'm
gonna try and shoot them because that's what we do.
But just the idea of like, that's the society we live in, is that it's so common that people go out and buy things they can't afford on credit, that there's people now whose livelihood is to go get that stuff. And that's fucking weird and fucked up if you think about it. Like, that's really.
Sure. And who is it? Is it Light? The one guy who says like they're no different than you. They just there's some talk about back in like sometimes all these scumbags deserve it, and some people are like, no, they're just like you. They they're like me and you, and they're.
Well, I think is that when like Harry Dean Stanton when Bud's sort of he quits and he's getting all pissed off, and him and Emilio Estevez are driving around, and he's like yelling about the bums.
Yeah.
Why don't we get these bums? Why don't somebody, and it's like, that's when the movie starts to kind of fall apart a little bit. Like it starts to not make any sense. I mean, it didn't make a ton of sense but it
Yeah.
starts to make like no sense at that point. Like things.
For me, it's the scene in the restaurant where his friends come in, and all of a sudden she's like licking the woman's fingers.
Yeah, that's a little. Yeah,
and I'm just, or her fake hand, and I'm just like, okay,
But
we
was it a
just
fake
went,
hand?
we
Was it a
went
robot?
full
Yeah.
on. You
I
know,
don't know. I love this movie, but there are a few elements that are thrown in. I'm like, I don't know how that pays off exactly.
Yeah.
Not that a lot of
And
it has
and
to pay off.
and it didn't. It was
Yeah.
just fucking
Kind of
weird.
just another weird thing about it. But
Yeah,
The woman with the Michael Jackson glove. I mean,
yes, yeah.
Is it a robot? Is it supposed to
I
be
don't
a
know. They
robot?
didn't have the budget for an actual robot hand, obviously.
yeah.
So they just
Yeah,
call
I think
it.
it's a block of wood with a sparkly
Michael
glove.
Jackson.
Yeah, that
I do
was
like how his idiot punk friends keep showing up, and they're never like they're in another movie. They'd be like the intimidating bad guys, but they're just goofballs. They're
They're-
not
yeah.
that smart, and they're in way over their heads. And
and people are gonna
yeah,
die.
Dick Rude, who's the bald
right,
one, and then I didn't realize it until watching. I was watching some of the interviews on the disc. The guy who plays the Mohawk, like the guy that talks like that,
yeah.
that actor.
He's
I-
he's in Jurassic Park. He's in like
Really?
everything.
Oh
He
my
is.
God.
It's like Miguel.
You would totally recognize him, Chris.
Yeah, he's in ton, and you would think he's like a little short guy.
Miguel
Yeah.
Sandoval.
Yeah, that's the
Yes.
tall punk, the one who talks like this.
Yeah.
Because he was told to talk like this.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that guy. Like
Yeah.
he's like, oh wow, that's the punk. He's been in a million things.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
in everything. He's in Get Shorty.
Yeah, he was on
Player
that
Present
TV show with
Danger.
Patricia Arquette that she had, whatever that was, the Medium, or I can't remember. But yeah, he's in tons of stuff.
Yeah.
He's in
Big
Howard
time,
the Duck.
big time character actor. Oh, he's in Howard the Duck.
Howard the
is
Duck
one-
must have come out around this time, right? What's the 80s?
Yeah.
1986. He went from Repo Man, then he did Straight to Hell, which I think was another
That's Alex Cox, yeah.
Cox. Sid and Nancy, another
Alex Cox.
Cox.
other
Man.
house.
And then he
Yeah.
did Howard the Duck.
You call a working actor.
Yeah, and he did Walker, which I
Another Alex Cox.
think Cox. Do the right thing.
Yeah.
Jungle
Not
Fever.
Alex Cox.
Not Alex Cox.
Jungle
No.
Fever.
Yeah.
So then he went switches little Spike Lee.
Yeah, Spike Lee.
Oh, he was in Repo Chick too.
Now I have Repo Chick, but I have not watched Repo Chick.
I didn't even know Repo Chick.
It looked.
It's a
I
thing.
saw a trailer and it looked terrible. So I've had a DVD of it since I worked at the paper, and I've never watched it.
Is it a sequel to Repo Man?
I think kind of. Yeah. There was
It's Alex Cox. It is.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
He did it. Yeah, but I don't know. It's like really CGI, tons of like cheap animation kind of stuff.
Did I say he's teaching like film and screenwriting at University of Colorado now?
Is he Alex Cox? He's written
Yeah.
a couple books about like filmmaking, and he's like a huge spaghetti western guy. I think he wrote a book about spaghetti westerns too.
Okay.
Well, that's Walker, wasn't that like?
Yeah, that was like his tribute to spaghetti westerns.
Interesting.
Then, yeah, he did Sid and Nancy after this, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But this movie is more punk than Sid and Nancy, I would argue.
I would argue as
Okay.
well. I would argue that's because the Sid and Nancy weren't really that punk.
Yeah, they were just, you know,
They were
on the lead song though.
They were
What is it?
on drugs.
Iggy Pop wrote it, but
Mhm.
Steve Jones, Sex Pistol guitarist, I think he plays guitar on the theme song.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that, we can't talk about Repo Man without talking about the soundtrack to Repo Man, which is there. Yep, there it is. One of the greatest movie soundtracks
Yeah, it's great.
ever.
And this, you know, the success of this soundtrack helped get it. Help get the movie into theaters, at least in like some small theaters.
That is the they talked about that on the disc. It was like the movie at some point, like they weren't going to release it to theaters at all, but they released the soundtrack. MCA, who was the parent company, released the soundtrack, and the soundtrack started selling really well. And they're like, "You got to make this movie. You got to put this movie out. The soundtrack's doing great."
Yeah.
So that's kind of helped get it out. It didn't do great in theaters, but it did get re-released later, right?
Re-released, and then as soon as it hit home video, I think it just was. I mean, because Criterion, almost 40 years later, they put it out.
Which is kind of crazy that it's a Criterion.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Repo
it
Man
I
is
am
a
too.
Criterion Collection film.
I'm glad that Criterion does not take themselves so seriously.
Exactly.
that
Right,
they
right.
It's,
recognize something
So
that's
one other side note on the soundtrack, there's a brewery in Chicago called Revolution Brewing,
Mhm.
and they over the course of a year, every month they would have a new beer release, and they did the entire Repo Man soundtrack and did
Really?
a beer for each song.
Oh,
And so you say, really, each song? And I say yes. They even had a beer called "When the Shit Hits the Fan."
I don't want to know what that one tastes like.
So
Yeah.
I remember the coup d'état being particularly good.
Soundtrack's got it's got Iggy Pop, it's got Black Flag, Suicidal Tendencies, Circle Jerks, Fear. You know, it's a real like LA punk
Oh yeah.
kind of time capsule. It's good stuff.
I guess so Dick Rude talks about that on the disc as well. He talks about being in the studio. He's like, I'm like 17 years old, punker from LA or from Southern California, and now I'm in a movie that's kind of based on me. And I'm in a studio watching Iggy Pop do the soundtrack, the theme song about a movie that's kind of about me.
That's got to be amazing.
Yeah, it's like insane. But yeah, it's a really great punk soundtrack for sure. I mean, it's not, it's funny, like I wasn't the biggest fan of Suicidal Tendencies or the Circle Jerks, but those songs, when you hear them,
Oh yeah.
Institutionalized.
When you hear Institutionalized, I mean, it's such you can't believe it existed. First, I'm like, what is this song? I can't believe this.
Yeah. It's so weird. And I hear it every once in a while there's a Sirius XM radio station that plays punk, and every once in a while they play that song, and it's just like, and there's the same reaction. Like, I can't believe this is what is this? This is such
What is this? Because the first time, because it's that long build where it's just him talking and
Yeah.
talking. You're like, what am I listening to? And then it just explodes, and then it goes
drum
back.
beat
And,
behind it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, when it was a Pepsi, she wouldn't give it to me. So good.
Once again, like that is the perfect encapsulation. That song is such a perfect encapsulation of sort of being a teenager.
It's 1984, man. I mean, we're all comic book fans, but you look at this film and it's a real easy jump from Repo Man to Dark Knight Returns, with that kind of near post-apocalyptic landscape, and just feeling completely disenfranchised from the Reagan administration and consumerism and all. I mean, they're cousins of each other in a certain way,
Everybody, is kind of talking right now about like how COVID has affected New York and LA, and how a lot of these urban centers, are sort of, really torn down and abandoned and that kind of thing. It's like, do you not remember the fucking 70s and 80s, New York and LA? Like
New York now in its post-COVID destruction is not anywhere like it was in fucking 1975.
No, it's insane. I mean, there would be, I was just watching some documentary stuff, but there would be whole blocks in the Bronx, blocks of apartment buildings just on fire.
Yeah. Just on fire. What was the Netflix show about kind of like the beginning of hip hop in New York?
Yeah, it wasn't
what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
it's
it was like the record.
It's like Up on the Downbeat or something like that. It was but yeah, I mean, they were pretty true in how they were showing like 1976 Brooklyn was fucking scary.
And there's a great book called The Bronx is Burning, and it ties together The Bronx Burning. It ties together a mayoral election, when the Yankees were in the World Series with Reggie, then the blackout like the rise of rap, the rise of disco. It was insane what was going on.
Yeah.
All in like, this one, a square foot area or square mile area. It's nuts.
Yeah. Well, and then, we're like Repo Man is other side of the country, and you've got the LA Orange County punk scene, and also, it probably I'm not a hip hop aficionado, but I don't know if like West Coast rap is even the seeds of it are being sown at that point, because it really kind of starts New York and then that pops up. But yeah, it's just this really neat time capsule of weird American life in the early 80s. I mean, Repo Man, it is a sweet spot of like 1984, which was a weird fucking year.
Yeah, it was. And speaking of comics and that era in this movie, I mean, early Love and Rockets was like, they were doing punk flyers that, practically be hanging this movie before they were doing comics.
And weird sci-fi shit. Yeah. It was a black and white punk comic that had UFOs in it.
Yeah, and self-published originally, very zine-like, and that's crazy.
1984, the top 10 movies that came out in 1984 for box office gross. Beverly Hills. Well, let's go. But we'll go number 10, Splash. Number 9, Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. Number 8, Romancing the Stone. Number 7, Footloose. 6, Police Academy. Number 5, The Karate Kid. Number 4, Gremlins. Number 3, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Number 2, Ghostbusters. Number 1, Beverly Hills Cop.
That's at least 7 or 8 of those in the theater,
right?
Yeah, it was huge.
Multiple times.
I think the only one I didn't see in theaters was probably Romancing the Stone.
I didn't see that either.
I might have seen that in theaters.
I probably saw
might
that.
not have seen Splash. I don't know.
Romancing the Stone. Wow, they got that one out quick after Indiana Jones, just in time for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
Is that Michael Douglas?
Yeah.
Yep.
And Kathleen Turner and Dana DeVito. Yeah. I just saw that for the first time a couple years ago.
Really?
And that and the other one I just saw last year was The Karate Kid. I'd never seen it.
What?
You've never seen The Karate Kid?
I don't know why.
You can never call yourself the movie man again.
How is that possible?
I just had never seen it, and then I just
and then you figure you'd watch Citizen Kane right after that.
I think you turned your mic off, Will. We can't hear you.
I think the movie gods turned his mic off.
Something happened.
Oh no,
guys! What do I do?
There we go. Now
there you go. You're good.
Nope. Now you're gone again.
Now you're gone.
Better? No.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, like that.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I move.
What's going on?
I don't know what's going on. New computer. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem.
You just got to hold his mic in place.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, you guys have seen that that meme that's been going on. It's like a Cineplex 4 theater place. It's like a I don't know, Hillside Square, megaplex movie theater from 1987. It's the summer of 1987, and there's 4 movies on the market.
I've seen it. Yeah.
So it's like, what is it? Predator, RoboCop,
Full Metal Jacket,
and The Lost Boys.
Lost Boys, yeah.
And so
I saw all those in the theater that summer.
Oh yeah. But I started looking up movies from 1987, and the list of movies that came out in 1987
It's crazy.
It is insane. It's like unbelievable. But I mean, looking at this list, it's pretty insane too. Like the 80s were such a incredible time
concentrated amounts in different entertainment medium. I mean, you look at your comics in 1986, 1987. You look at those movies dropping. You look at music. I mean, it was concentrated. It was neat. It was neat.
It was a great time to be like our age.
Yeah.
To be young, no family to worry about. Just
Oh yeah.
I mean, 1984, I was 13, so it's like something like Repo Man,
yeah,
blow my mind. Yeah. The 80s were such an odd. Like I was talking about this to somebody else. Like, I love obviously 70s cinema.
Mhm.
sort of like the outlaw cinema kind of stuff that was going on in the 70s, and then but the 80s was like this, incredible
Big,
amount
like
of
everything was, huge
Yeah.
and fun. I mean, and well made too.
fun,
And
and then the 90s was a bit of a downturn.
yeah, I would agree.
Uh 2000
I mean,
was
for
pretty
those
good.
kind of movies, because like in the 80s, you had like you mentioned, like Ghostbusters, or you had like Back to the Future, and these were huge movies, but like really good,
good and
you know?
funny, and they
You can
weren't just
defend them as
spectacle.
good
They weren't-
movies. Yeah,
because I think what happens is then you get into like by the 2000s, it's like everything is just gigantic movies. There's no, and that by now
Subtlety.
it's like everything's a superhero movie, and
yeah, and everything's gonna have a sequel. Like
yeah,
you're going into a universe, as opposed to. I mean, when Ghostbusters came out, I wasn't like I need to see 10 movies like this. It was like this one movie is great.
yeah,
That's all I need.
Yeah, the 90s was an interesting one because I mean you obviously had good like indie stuff,
Mhm.
but I think
Yeah.
there was
I
don't
think
know,
of the 90s as like the rise of Tarantino and Guy Ritchie.
Tarantino
Yeah,
and like
that's-
Paul
Mhm.
Thomas Anderson and Wes Anderson. Those.
Wes
Yeah, I would
Anderson.
agree. It's more
Coen
those kind of
Brothers.
arty movies. Yeah, Tarantino especially though.
Yeah, that was kind of his decade.
he's still
Yeah.
going.
Yeah,
Well,
he's
I
still
think
going.
he
loved
just made.
Once
I
Upon a
think
Time.
he.
We talked
about it
last
every
time.
time Will's on.
I
I think
know.
he just made his best movie.
I know. He's good. I love Tarantino.
I do too.
I was thinking like about go off on a Tarantino for just a little bit, but I was like, I remember seeing Reservoir Dogs in the theater. I drove into Chicago because I had read about it somewhere, and it's like that was almost 30 years ago, and it's like so I've kind of been a fan of Tarantino for his whole career, and it's fun to watch him because he's like I think he's really one of the greats. I mean, he really makes great movies, and it's just been kind of fun to watch a whole career. Like so I love Scorsese, but I wasn't watching Taxi Driver when I was 6 or 7 or whatever. You know.
Yeah, Tarantino was starting to make movies whenever we were in late high school or college, and so he was the new it guy. And now we're old, and we can look back on like 30 years of filmmaking.
And it's there's a lot of guys who, and a lot of directors who. They're kind of you love them when you're young, and when you get older, you're like, well, that was fun, but him, it's like he really was good.
Kevin Smith.
He really is good. Who?
Sorry, Kevin Smith.
Yeah. Yes. Kevin Smith.
When did talking about Scorsese, when did Raging Bull come out?
It was like I think 80,
70,
80 or 81.
77.
Because I saw that in
Okay.
theaters. I probably shouldn't have, but I was
Yeah.
wrong. But that was like my first Scorsese.
Yeah, I think I must have. I don't know what mine would have been. It must have been Raging Bull, I would think, because I wouldn't have gone to see like New York, or I wouldn't have cared.
Right.
Unless I saw Taxi Driver in high school, maybe like on tape.
What year did that come out?
Taxi Driver was, I want to say 76,
76?
because it was up against the Oscar with that, Network, All the President's Men, Rocky, and one other movie.
I lost to Rocky.
And Rocky won.
Rocky won.
Rocky's a great movie.
I got nothing against
is a
Rocky.
great movie.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. It's a great movie, sir. It's a great
I remember seeing Taxi Driver long before I saw the movie. I mean, years before I saw it. There was a picture in like Time or Newsweek, just a little black and white picture. I've never forgotten this.
76.
Of Travis Bickle like pointing his finger at his ear, and
blood.
his finger's all covered in blood. It's like at the end when he's going like,
Yeah.
But I saw that and I was so horrified by that picture because I thought he had pushed his finger into his head and pulled it out like that was his blood on his finger. And I was like really disturbed as a kid. Like I was like, I don't want to see that movie. I love it. I've seen it like 50 times.
Yeah. It is interesting though, like to watch like you said, Tarantino. I think that's one of the reasons, and I'm with you. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is his best movie, and not everyone agrees with that, and that's fine.
No.
And I've had discussions with people, and I understand why people don't agree with it. I just think it is because it's sort of, to me, it's the culmination of everything he's learned.
I would agree.
It's taking his innate talent that he had from the beginning
Mhm.
of dialogue and sort of this character
Camera
study.
work. His camera work.
But by the
Yeah,
time
all
he
of
has
it.
gotten to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he has refined everything and learned so much. And it's like he puts it all in that film.
Right. And I think he's mature enough where it's not just like, look how cool I can be. It's like,
Yeah.
he really takes time to like just these beautiful shots of like the streets and the neon signs coming on and all that. It's just, that's something an older filmmaker would do, I think, because it's just like, this is something, put something up on screen people are going to remember. And then, there's the crazy violence at the end and funny stuff, but it's not all, it's about guys who were over the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a changing Hollywood.
It's
for a lot of reasons for a lot of people.
Mhm.
It's a love letter to 1969 LA.
Yeah.
That's how I
And to the
Right.
kind of movies that were made back then and to the people who made because Leo's character's he's not like a big star. He like was a working actor and he went to Italy and made a bunch of semi-crappy movies and came back. But it's like, Tarantino loves the real people who did that.
Mhm.
And he loves that stuff.
Oh, it's a love letter to Margot Robbie's character. No,
Sharon Tate?
It's
Sharon Tate. It's
what it is
in a lot of ways.
it is a love letter to all those things, but it's also it's him taking back those murders.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
They
Yeah.
did to Hollywood, what they did to LA.
Mhm.
And he grew up in LA, and he said it before. It's like you don't understand LA unless you were born there.
Right.
Like he even makes fun of like DiCaprio about that. It's like him and Brad Pitt were born in Los Angeles. They grew up in Los Angeles. They know what and it's like DiCaprio, as much as he's
Brad
the biggest,
Pitt, yeah.
it's like you don't get out of LA. You don't understand LA. He kind of tells him that in a joking fashion.
Yeah.
But I think to Tarantino, like 1969 and those murders, it completely changed Los Angeles at a time when it was very influential on him, and I think it's him taking that back. It's his,
He would have been
created his alternate timeline. He's created where it's like he killed Hitler.
right.
In the Quentin Tarantino universe, Hitler loses.
It. Yeah.
Hitler's dead. Hitler, the World War II didn't end like it. I think it did.
And it's like it's his alternate universe that he's created, and it's his history that he's almost trying to retell. These versions of history that. So I think he talks about like 1969. People didn't close their doors.
Yeah, it was the end of the innocence. That was before that kids could hitchhike.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, a common thing.
It's about LA, and it's about old Hollywood, and it's about these stars, and it's about Sharon Tate, and it's about Charles Manson, and all those things. It's really just about, to me, it's about him going, well, this is what LA would have been if that hadn't happened. This is what it could have. This is, you know what I mean? Like this is what I want to have happen.
So I'm gonna switch. Yeah, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna make it not happen, and then
I'm gonna. Yeah. He's basically he's retelling history.
And it is, when you watch it, because I've heard of people, I guess younger people who didn't even know what was about. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't like. Why is this such a big deal? Why are we following these people? But for someone like us who grew up knowing about Manson and all that, I mean, I was. 2 when it happened, but
Will, I think you and I should just do a Quentin Tarantino.
I know we keep going
because we always end up talking about.
I was going to say, so thank you everyone for listening to
Repo Man,
our podcast on Repo Man, proving once again that every movie comes back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's right. We could start with Reservoir Dogs and work our way through.
I would be.
I'm not invited. I'm not invited for this. Is that what?
We didn't say that. Absolutely. We could do ACT.
I'm completely down with us doing around Tarantino.
Tarantino.
Just
my God.
We'll do the filmography.
You think I talk a lot now about comic books?
Oh my God. When Pulp Fiction came out, I worked at the newspaper, and I was in the graphics department. It was me and a couple other people, and me and one of the other graphic artists. We talked about Tarantino so much that our boss had to take us aside and tell us to shut up about Pulp Fiction.
Well, what you were saying, that's a great story. What you were saying about going to see Reservoir Dogs. And that I'm trying to remember. I don't remember where we saw it, but it was that was the movie where my wife and I went and saw that.
Mhm.
And we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know who Quentin Tarantino was. I think we had seen True Romance
Yeah.
or something and kind of had an inkling.
Would it been? I can't remember if that was before or not. But
No, True Romance was not. Yeah, it's unless you saw Reservoir Dogs. I mean, that's his first
I don't
movie,
remember.
right?
Yeah, I don't remember. Well, no, it's not his first script. It's his first movie he directed. He
Right.
didn't
Okay. Yeah, True Romance came out years later.
Okay. Anyway, it doesn't
Pretty
matter.
sure.
But we went and saw that, and then it was like, who the fuck is this guy? And it was probably really was the first director that I ever was like, okay, I need to see the next movie this guy does. I don't know who this guy is. You know, I don't think I ever did that with a director before that. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was the first time. And then I remember us waiting in line to see Pulp Fiction. Came out the day it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that opening night.
Had Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels come out about the same time as Reservoir Dogs?
That was after.
Was it? Okay.
I had to be, I think. I remember when I saw Reservoir Dogs, and again, I didn't know much about it. Maybe I knew Steve Buscemi was in there. I mean, I don't know what I knew,
Harvey
but I
Keitel.
distinctly remember during the ear scene, like you could feel everyone in the theater just pushing themselves back into their chairs. Like,
yeah,
it's so horrific and amazing.
But you don't see him do it. But you'd think,
all right. So it's been decided we're doing a Quentin Tarantino podcast.
Okay, Reservoir Dogs came out in 90.
I'm sure no one else has ever done a Tarantino film podcast. I'll guarantee it.
We haven't done it.
I think maybe we had went and seen, because Reservoir Dogs came out in 92, True Romance came out in 93.
Yeah, Lock, Stock came out in 98.
Okay.
So that was a while.
Oh, wow.
So, but I think maybe we had seen True Romance, and then I don't know if we rented Reservoir Dogs. I can't remember.
Reservoir Dogs was much bigger on videotape.
Yeah, because it wasn't
a big hit. Like Pulp Fiction was his hit, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was really big on videotape, and I think that's what happened. Is maybe we saw True Romance in the theaters because my wife was a very big Christian Slater fan, so we may have seen True Romance and then rented Reservoir Dogs, and then been like, okay, now I have to go see. But it was the both of us. Like we both absolutely loved Pulp Fiction, and she kind of fell off of Tarantino after that for whatever reason. She didn't really get into Foxy Brown.
Jackie Brown was next, and then and then you get into Kill Bills and
and then there's the whole thing of the Tarantino verse where characters are connected, and that got into Natural Born Killers, and because the Christian Slater is what the Harvey Keitel character from Reservoir Dogs. That's a younger version of him.
Is he? I never heard that one. What I heard was that in Tarantino's crazy mind, the Kill Bill movies are movies within the world that like they would go see. Like, so those are like movies.
The Kill Bill were right. I knew there were some, but I didn't know.
Yeah. I think it was Kill Bill. And then there was when he was, I think he keeps adding to this like George Lucas, but then somehow the fact that Hitler was killed, like that changed away. So that's why a movie that's why the world is more violent in his movie. I don't know. Who knows?
So Michael Madsen's character in Reservoir Dogs, is that who you're talking about?
He's the brother of
Harvey
Travolta's, right?
Harvey Keitel.
Oh, Harvey.
They're like
so
Vega
Harvey
brothers?
Keitel's character
they're
and
the
Christian
Vega.
Slater they're the same. They're the same.
Did we just lose your microphone?
I don't know.
Chris froze. Chris is
looks like he's frozen.
This is why he can't be part of the podcast. Will, don't tell him. But Chris can't.
I can hear you.
Now he's
really bad. He's got really, really bad. I don't think Harvey Keitel's character, Mr. White.
No, it's well. I mean,
his name was Larry.
Yeah, and it's Clarence and
Clarence
Larry,
Holy.
and he talks about his ex-girlfriend in Reservoir Dogs, and it's the
Alabama.
same
No.
character as
But he just
Alabama.
mentions Alabama, but they're not supposed to be the same character.
Because I think in Quentin's screenplay for True Romance, because I used to have a copy of that because I'm a giant
His
nerd.
name was Larry.
No, I think Christian Slater's character dies at the end of True Romance
I think you're right.
Mm.
in his screenplay, and then in the movie they changed it.
I believe that is correct. And he was pissed that they changed it.
Right.
Clarence Hawley.
Whatever.
Is it White Boy Day? I don't think they, while a lot of the characters are either related, and that even goes all the way back to like characters that are in the Hateful Eight, like they're the great
That's crazy.
characters in his. Oh yeah, he definitely does that, but I'm not sure that is one of them. The Clarence and Mr. White. But they're
I'll have to catch up and read. And
what Will was saying is Michael Madsen is Vic Vega, who is Vincent Vega's brother, and they were gonna do at some point.
Vincent
they wanted
Vega's
to do
brother.
a
Vega Brothers movie, kind of.
Yeah, it didn't make sense after a while. They got a little old because it was supposed to be before.
Right. And Travolta, I mean, Travolta desperately needs another career renaissance like he had with Pulp Fiction.
I don't know if he's got another one in him.
I don't get that.
That
I
cat
remember
don't
when
have
Pulp Fiction
9 lives.
came out, though. When Pulp Fiction came out, it was like exciting for me to see Travolta like being a star again, because I'm like, I remember when I was a kid, he was huge, and now he's back. Yeah,
and Bruce Willis.
And that was when Bruce Willis like started being good. You know, he was like he could be in like a real movie. I mean, I love Die Hard more than anything, but you know, like an actual serious Oscar kind of movie.
Right. Yeah, I don't think
that was before
Sixth
I
Sense,
See Dead People. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like 5 years before that. Yeah.
All right, so there you go. There's 20 minutes on Repo Man and 40
half an hour on
Tarantino.
Every movie
around comics, ACTV. So anyway, if you would like more of this, you can sign up to be a patron over at patreon.com/aroundcomics, where we give all sorts of bonus content, including ACTV. Sal does Future Stacks and Top of the Stack and
QT next.
That's right. I like that.
ACQT. Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. I tell you what, we'll let the prospective patrons vote with their dollars. If you want to hear Around Comics talk about Quentin Tarantino movies,
how much of a
up.
stretch goal do we have to make it on Patreon to get Will as a permanent Quentin Tarantino?
Oh, I'll be on that all the time.
He'll do that for nothing.
I'll do that for nothing.
All right. We could be starting something. There's other stuff like Tom Versus, and then I've got interview this week. Swear to God. So you'll get a new 30 minutes with interview this week.
Still waiting on a new Tom's Versus. I haven't even
Tom
seen
Versus. Yep. And then of course there is the always free and available to everyone Tuesday episode. Oh, and Sal's writing. You're doing reviews. I liked your Shang-Chi review.
I have done a few written comic book reviews on the Patreon. And those are free. They're if you're a patron, you get them earlier than everyone else, like 3 days early, but they're free after that. So people can go if they want to read my comic book reviews.
There you go.
I pick a few books a week. Usually I try to.
And speaking of writing, Will, what you up to anything these days?
You know, I am up to something. I've actually turned in the first issue script and I'm working on the second, and it is, but I cannot say anything about it. And I'm not just being coy. I literally signed a legal document saying I cannot say anything.
Well, you've been wanting to write Spider-Man for years.
Soon. I've been what?
You've been wanting to write Spider-Man for years.
Oh, I'd love to write Spider-Man. It's not Spider-Man. It's new characters.
Is it Marvel or DC?
It's neither.
Oh, neither.
Yeah. But I'm anticipating this to break anytime now. But I'm legally bound from saying anything. But I'm very excited about it. It's superheroes. I'll say that.
You'll say it next week on the ACQ.
And we'll talk about Madonna.
Oh God. So we're starting with Reservoir Dogs, huh? Okay. I'm good with that. All right. So we hope that you enjoyed this episode. We enjoyed bringing it to you. More stuff for Around Comics at aroundcomics.com. Check out patreon.com/aroundcomics, and there's all the social media stuff. So anyway, we will be back on Tuesday night with our regular Around Comics video stream, and then that's released for the audio folks afterwards. In the meantime, and thank you, Will. Thank you, Will, for sitting in.
Thank you, guys. I love it as always. So much fun.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, we're not as formal with you because you're just kind of one of the guys. So so thanks, Will. All right, we'll be back on Tuesday night. In the meantime,
in between time,
we'll be everywhere in
and
around comics. ACTV Repo Man, Quentin Tarantino review show.
There's a lot of things in common there.
Everywhere.